Start over? But I worked so hard to get here. After almost 20 years as a card investor, thousands of cards graded, and seven figures of sales, I've fine-tuned my system into a well-oiled machine. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what I do if I had to start over from zero. And oh, by the way, we're only going to start with $100 just to prove that this works no matter what your starting budget is. Let's get into it. So here's the plan. We're going to break this into 3 phases. Phase 1 is all about getting off the ground. So $100 really doesn't give us much margin for error. And so we want to be really strategic about where we move our money here so that we can build up some breathing room. Phase 2 is about building cash flow. So this is where we'll add in the system and we'll start to plug and play to generate cash on a monthly basis. And finally, phase 3 is about making big bets. So at this point in the journey, we've built up the value of our inventory, we've built up some cash flow, and so we've got some money to work with. We can afford to tie up some money for a little bit. And this is where we can start to take some swings at plays that might be a little bit riskier, but have giant outsized returns attached to them if we get it right. By the end of this video, you'll have the complete roadmap. So let's dive into phase 1. Since we're only starting with $100, the number one goal I have for phase 1 with getting off the ground is to build some breathing room, to build up my bankroll, and this is what's going to unlock the ability to get into better strategies that are more efficient. But in the meantime, since we only have $100, we don't have the luxury of being able to get into grading and holding cards and doing some of those things that can generate bigger returns. So we've got to start by putting in the work, and the only thing I'm focused on is finding quick flip opportunities. I want to find cards that are below market value, buy them and flip them, and I want to do it as quickly as I possibly can. And so the way to do this is, first of all, we've got to know market values, right? So we can't afford a paid comp tool yet. So I'm going to start with a free tool, which is 130point.com. This is a tool where you can look up any card and see recent sales of that card. And that's what's going to help us understand current market value for a particular card. And that way we know what our actual target sale price is, and we can make sure that we're getting a good enough deal to actually have a flip opportunity. So what I'm looking for in a quick flip opportunity is a card that I can buy for at least 35% below market price. And why 35%? Well, that number gives us enough to work with, enough meat on the bone that we can cover, any sales tax that you're paying when you purchase the card, eBay fees, shipping costs, all that stuff. It's about 20% if you look at the total costs. So when you buy a card, you're already kind of down 20%. And so that's where we need to make sure that we're building in some margin so that we can make that quick flip. Now, sometimes on the lower end of the market, you can find 100, 200, 500%, and that's a great play if you can find those types of cards. A couple of my favorite ways to find quick flip opportunities are looking off of eBay, getting onto sites where, there's not as much traffic, and sometimes auctions go lower than they should. So if you can scoop up a deal off of eBay and then put it onto eBay where there's much more traffic, sometimes that's all it takes to make a quick flip. Another way to find quick flips is to buy card lots and to piece out the contents of a card lot one at a time. So when I say card lot, I mean there's 10 cards that are all listed together. Sometimes if that's listed at auction, you're going to end up getting a better deal versus if those cards were listed individually. So if you can buy the cards in a lot, then you do the work to piece out the individual cards in that lot. That sometimes is enough to unlock a profit. And one of my favorite ways to look for lots is to look for recent products, because a lot of times people that get into breaks will take the contents of that break and they'll just say, I'm just too lazy to piece this stuff out, so I'm just going to throw it all into the same listing and I'll take what I can get for it. So a lot of times you'll see this in newer products. So if you look for when the new Bowman Chrome product drops, look for Bowman Chrome, insert the year lot. And that's where you'll find some of these listings where you're going to have multiple kind of weird mismatched cards in the lot. And what I found is the more random the lot is, usually the better deal you get. Another thing I like to do is to look for bad listings. So listings that end at weird times, something that ends at 3 a.m, holidays where people are focused elsewhere, a card auction that ends during the week at 10:30 a.m. Just people are at work not paying attention, and sometimes you can find a good deal that way as well. Another way to find deals is to look for listings that have bad pictures or blurry, uncropped pictures or misspellings in the title or titles that are missing keywords. So maybe it's a graded card, but it's missing PSA 10 in the listing title. There are different ways that you can find good deals by just being savvy and putting in the work to find them. So to give you an example of this and just to show you that it's possible, let's look at some LeBron silver prisms from 2024. And so this is that chalk toss one. It's a cool looking card. But when you look at the raw prices, these are all selling within just a few days of each other. And there is variance in the sales. So you're looking at 18, 20, 26, 15, 22. Oh, $10. What if we buy this $10 one and flip it for 20 or 22 or 26 up here, right? Like that's what we're looking for is these little opportunities. Here's one that sold for 32. And so, can we find one of these cards that goes a little bit on the low end? Here's one for 13. And then the same day, another one sold for 23. The same day, another one sold for 28, right? So you start to see that there are opportunities like this if you can just be savvy and focus on one card or one particular set and just look for the variance in sales from one day to the next or even in the same day. Can you buy that one that goes low at auction and then turn it around and flip it for a profit as a fixed price listing where you can control the sale price? Now, I will warn you, this takes effort. You're basically unlocking free money when you find these deals, and there are lots of people out there that want free money. So it does take work to find these deals, but I promise you they're out there. And so I want to repeat this process until I've built up $250. That is when we graduate from phase one because $250 gives us more room to work with, and it starts to unlock some of the other strategies that help us move a lot faster. So let's talk about phase two next. Now, phase two is where we start to build cash flow. And I can tell you from experience, I've tried dozens of different strategies in the card market. Some of them work, some of them don't. Some of them are consistent, some of them are not. There is nothing that works better and more consistently in this market than grading sports cards when you target the right types of cards. And so this is what we're going to focus on in phase two is starting to layer in grading. Now, let me start by warning you, there is a wrong way to do this. So if you are targeting cards that have little to no upside where you're spending a couple dollars on the card, you're spending $22 to grade it, and then you're coming back with a PSA 10 that's worth $28, there is no meat on the bone there. There is no margin. You are going to lose money. So what we have to do instead is find cards that have giant upside attached to them. Okay, it's the same grading fee that we're paying either way. I want to win big when I get the grade that I'm looking for. And so the first thing that I'm doing here is I'm doing some research. I'm looking at my comp tool. And so I'm looking for those cards that I can buy ungraded for $20 or less and that sell for over $100 as a PSA 10. That gives me a big margin. Even after the grading fees, even after selling fees, I'm still making quite a bit of money on every single 10 that I get. And that helps offset any cards that don't get 10s and any cards that come in the mail that aren't actually gradable that I have to liquidate. The other thing I'm looking for here is cards that have higher gem rates. So the gem rate is the number of PSA 10s divided by the total number of cards graded. And so it's basically like the success rate for all the copies of that card that have been graded so far. And so a higher gem rate often indicates to us that that set might have been more cleanly manufactured. And you're going to have an easier time finding clean, ungraded copies of that card compared to a card that has a much lower gem rate. So the gem rate really only matters before you can see the card in person, because even a card that has 100% gem rate, if your copy has a dinged corner, it's not going to get a 10. But it can at least help clue us in, since we can't evaluate condition perfectly just through internet pictures. It can at least be kind of like an early indicator about which cards might have a better chance at getting a 10. And so I like to target cards that are really as high of a gem rate as I can find that still offer that kind of PSA 10 margin, but usually 50% and above is a good benchmark to shoot for. Now, it does take work to find these cards. So you're going to have to use your comp tool to look up raw and PSA 10 values and then cross-reference that with the gem rates, which you can find on a site like gemrate.com does a really good job of showing all kinds of grading data. And then you're looking for the cards that both have the high gem rate and have the high PSA 10 margin. And so you really only need to identify one example of this type of a card. Now, if you want to shortcut the work, I actually designed a software that will automatically surface some of the top cards in the entire market to target for grading purposes based on overall upside. So this is called Coin, the Card Opportunity and Investing Navigator. We call it Coin for short. But it shows you all the key data points in one table. You can see I've got it filtered right now to show cards that are $20 and under raw and $100 or more as a PSA 10. And there are a whole bunch of them that fit that criteria. And so if you want to try this, you can try it for free. I'll leave a link in the description. But if you like it and you want it for half off, plus my full investing system and personalized help, you can join our card investing community called Ignite. I'll leave details in the description. Otherwise, let's get back to the video. So once I identify a good card that meets the criteria, that has a good gem rate and it has high upside as a PSA 10, I'm off to eBay to look for clean copies of this card. Now let's say we find a card that's about $15 ungraded and it sells for $125 as a PSA 10. For example, this 2023 Roman Anthony Mega Box Bowman Chrome card has the exact numbers that we're talking about here, at least at the time of this recording, but they sell for about $15 to $18 ungraded and they sell between $123 and $129 as PSA 10s. So let's call it 15 raw and $125 as a PSA 10 just for easy math here. And to make this one even better, the gem rate is 78%. That's an incredibly high gem rate and a card that gives me a lot of confidence that I might be able to go and find some clean copies to buy. So remember, we have $250 to work with at this point. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually set aside 50 of that. And that's going to be my kind of backup plan. So if grading doesn't go the way I want it to, I want to at least have some money to work with. Also, grading does take time. So while our cards are off being graded, I want to use that $50 to continue making quick flips and see if I can continue to build up the value of my inventory. Now with the other $200, I'm going to buy 5 of this Roman Anthony card. I'm going to look on eBay. I'm going to only buy the ones that actually look clean by checking the centering, by being really picky and skipping the ones that have clear damage or imperfections in the pictures. And since I don't have a ton of wiggle room and I really need to find clean copies of this card, I'm also going to check the seller's other listings to make sure that they don't have a bunch of graded cards where it looks like they probably would have graded the card if it was clean enough. And I'm also going to reach out to the seller if I can't tell the condition based on the pictures itself. And I may just ask the question, hey, I was looking at this card and wondered if there were any imperfections I should be aware of. And sometimes you'll get a better understanding of what the condition is like based on the seller's response. Now, it's still not perfect and you still may end up with a card or two that aren't worth submitting, but these are some easy ways to raise your success rate when you're buying online. So I'm going to use my money to buy 5 of this card, and that's going to eat up about $75 or so. And I'm going to set aside $110 for grading fees at $22 per card. Now, to get that $22 price point per card, we have to submit at the value bulk submission level with PSA. And to get that, you actually have to have a PSA membership, which is $149 to $199 per year. We obviously cannot afford that at this point in our journey. So what I'm going to do instead is use a third-party group submitter. And so you can oftentimes find this at your local card shop. You can find them online, but there are people who will do group submissions where you don't have to have a minimum number of cards, and you can still unlock some pretty favorable pricing. Now, when my 5 cards come in, I inspect them very carefully because I don't want to submit cards that have obvious issues. Those are going to be PSA 9s or worse almost automatically if there are clear and obvious issues. And anytime we get a 9, it's going to bite into the profits that we make on a PSA 10. So we want to avoid 9s as best as we're able to. And so of the 5 cards, maybe I find that one of them had a surface imperfection that I couldn't really see in the scans. So I don't even want to send that card in. I'm just going to liquidate that card and get my money back out of it. I'm only going to lose a couple of dollars after the fees, but I don't want to leave my money stuck in that card where I don't have a plan for it anymore. And then I'll just put that money back into my budget to continue to make quick flips, or I'll go out and find another card that I think looks gradable and buy that one instead. But in the meantime, the 4 that we are going to submit to PSA, let's send those things off and see how we do. Now remember, while those are being graded, we still kept our $50 that we can keep making quick flip plays. So we're not completely out of business, but I will warn you, it is a little bit slow going when we're working with a small budget up front. If you're willing to put more money in up front, you can start buying for another grading submission and keep this going. Ideally, we want to get to the point where we're submitting at least 1 order per month so that we have 1 order coming back every single month. And that's how you start to create consistent cash flow in this market. So PSA takes a few months to grade them, and then our cards finally come back and we get to see how we did. Now, my all-time gem rate is a little bit under 70%, Great number to track, by the way, if you don't, so you can see how you're doing over time. But to keep this realistic, I'm going to actually say let's only go 2 for 4 on this particular order. So we get 2 PSA 10s out of the 4 cards. PSA 9s go for about $40 each. PSA 10s go for about $125 each. We're into each of these 4 cards for $40 a piece when we look at the $15 raw price plus a few dollars of shipping and plus the $22 grading fee. So around $40 per card. So let's say we have $160 total into this grading order, and we're able to sell the cards for 40, 40, 125, and 125. And then we do lose the selling fees after this. So let's chop off, let's just say 15%, even though selling fees are a little bit lower than that. Let's just be conservative here. And let's say that we are losing basically $6 per PSA 9, and we're making $65 per PSA 10. And so overall, we're looking at $130 of profit on the 2 10s, and then we're losing $12 total on the 2 9s. So all in, we're profiting $118 from this grading order. Not bad, right? For just 4 cards and only going 50% gem rate on them. So that means we just took our value from $250 up to about $365 with 1 grading order. Now from here, all we do is rinse and repeat. So we go find more raw cards that have high PSA 10 upside and ideally high gem rates, and we go and find more clean copies of those cards on eBay and submit them for grading. Now the fun part is, as we continue to add value to our inventory, we can either do more cards per grading order or we can do higher value per grading order, and that's going to help us go a lot faster than this first order where it is pretty slow going. And this is where, again, I'm saying if you have $1,000 to work with, you're going to be able to go way faster versus having to do this one order at a time and only send a few cards per order. But once you start to open up your budget a little bit and build up some bankroll here, this is where it starts to really compound as you take those profits and reinvest them back into your business and into that next grading submission. And so when you think about grading and how do we make this as efficient as possible, there are 2 main levers that we can pull. So one is to get better at identifying clean raw cards and sending cards that end up getting a high gem rate. The second thing is the value of those cards. So again, if we're sending low end nonsense that doesn't have any real upside, we're just going to be really frustrated at the end of the day because it's not going to make us money. On the flip side, if we are targeting cards that have giant upside, where I can make 2x, 3x, 5x on some of these cards that actually get PSA 10s, that is where we can move so much faster. And here's the thing, it costs the same amount to grade those cards. It takes the same amount of time. It takes the same amount of effort to find them. You just make more. So why not use this to your advantage and go out and target cards that actually have high upside? It's one of the biggest levers in this entire market. So if you take nothing else away from this video, target higher upside cards to grade. It will serve you well. Now, I ultimately want to get to the point where I'm sending 1 grading submission per month because that's going to give me cash flow every single month. And since we know grading takes 3 to 4 months for bulk submissions to come back, what I would be doing is trying to allot $500 per month for each grading submission. And so what I want to do is build up my inventory with grading orders until I'm at the point where I have $1,500 to work with. And then I'm just going 500 in month 1, 500 in month 2, 500 in month 3. And then month 4 rolls around and I get that first order back and I have all the profits from that order plus the original $500 that I can pour back into the next month's submission. Now I keep going with grading indefinitely, but phase 2 really ends and we begin phase 3 when we get to $2,500 of value. So let's talk about that next. Now, phase 3 is where we want to start to take some big bets and we want to leverage some of the patterns in the market and we want to understand what are the types of cards that actually rise over time and just put our money into those cards that have the best chance at rising. Yes, this is a little bit riskier, but if we know what we're doing, we can kind of mitigate that risk by putting our money in the right places at the right time. And so there's 2 main strategies I want to execute here when I'm looking at phase 3. So first of all, we're going to keep working our grading orders with that $1,500. So $500 each for month 1, month 2, and month 3. And we're just going to keep that rolling. And that'll be our kind of ongoing work, our cash flow. But then now that we've unlocked this other money, we have the ability to have this other side of our business where we place some of these asymmetric bets. Now, an asymmetric bet is like there's not as much downside, but there's a whole lot of upside. And that's the type of bet that I like to make in this market. And so the first of the strategies that I want to look at here is understanding the seasonal timing game and understanding that if you look over the history of the card market, there are patterns from one season to the next. And so there's a lot of nuance that goes into this, but the overarching theme is that values tend to dip on the way out of the season and they tend to rise going into the following season. So it's all about attention, right? Like what are people paying attention to? By the end of the season, we're focused on only the teams that are the real contenders. A lot of attention goes elsewhere to other sports. At the end of the calendar year for baseball wise, we have the World Series and then there's a bunch of holidays and stuff and baseball's out of season. So when a sport is out of sight and out of mind, that's oftentimes when you can scoop up some really nice deals on really nice cards. And then guess what happens just a few months later? Excitement picks up for the new season as we have attention coming back into the market. Spring training starts to happen and values for cards start to pick up. And so I've had tons of success over the years with just leveraging the seasonal market swings by buying at the right time toward the end of the season when values are at relative low points and then selling those cards before the season even begins. We're not even trying to speculate on players and predict the future here. We're just taking the money when it's there and taking the easy profits. Now, this certainly isn't a guarantee because not all cards are going to rise, not all players are going to rise. But when you start to understand the types of players that are interesting for the crowd to go after in the preseason, all you do is just buy those cards a few months ahead of time and then you sell to the crowd. So you're kind of doing what's not exciting in the moment to set yourself up for a very exciting payday just a few months out. And so assuming that we're still keeping that $1,500 in our grading operation, we've got $1,000 to play with. And so what I would be looking at is where are we in the calendar year? What sport is out of season or what sport is nearing the end of the season? Sometimes it's not even in the off season, but it's like on the way out of the season. The teams and players that are out of contention end up kind of dipping a little bit sooner than you might even expect. But that's where you can scoop up a good deal. And because we've got the flexibility to hold for a few months now, we can tie up some money and try to make one of these plays. Now, I do like targeting rarer cards because that gives us some influence over the price when we go to sell, when we don't have to compete with 40 other copies of the exact same card that are all listed at the same time. But this works with graded cards, it works with ungraded cards. There are lots of ways to win with this strategy as long as we get the right players at the right time. Now, the other part of phase 3 is looking at the longer term game and understanding, okay, there are some players that tend to rise over time almost indefinitely. And when you look at who that is, it's not the all-star caliber players. It's not even the superstar caliber players. It's the true GOAT caliber players, like the absolute elite best of the best. And if we look at some examples here, you can see over the past couple of years, Michael Jordan way up, Tom Brady way up, Mantle up, Ohtani up, LeBron up, Mahomes up. And so what's the commonality between all of those players? They're all kind of that GOAT caliber player or perceived to have at least a chance at becoming a GOAT caliber player. So this is a little riskier because we are to some degree trying to predict the future, but we know that this is the type of player that tends to rise over time is when we can get the best card of the best player in the highest grade that we can fit into our budget. And that's what I'm looking to do so that I can capture some of that upside. And so really when we get to phase 3, this is all optional. Really the grading game alone can be enough to keep your business rolling and growing over time. But what I like to do is have 2 different operations running at the same time where we keep the grading as more of the day-to-day. And then the other side of the house, we're making these big bets where we're playing the seasonal market swings or we're making a bet on a player that we believe in for the longer haul. Or maybe we're even trying to pick out our favorite sleeper pick. Like there's just plays that you can make that are a little bit riskier where you don't have the ability to do this when you have a limited budget. But once you've unlocked some money, you can take some of these swings and you might miss every now and then, but you're going to connect on one every now and then as well. And that's where you can set yourself up for some really nice paydays. And so from here, all I'm doing is rinsing and repeating because I know what works and I know that I don't have to get cute. I don't have to go and reinvent the wheel and try to get lucky or try to create some brand new strategy. I can just do the sort of boring work because I know that it's going to get me the results that I'm looking for. And the results are not boring at all when you continue to plug into the right strategies. And so from a high level, this is what I would do if I had to start all the way over. It's not easy. There's going to be some bumps along the road, but it is actually pretty simple when you take a look at the strategies that we're actually rolling out here. It's just that it takes some work. And you have to stay consistent and not give up and quit. The only real way you lose in this game is to completely just give up and quit. So don't be a quitter. And the most fun part about this is that all of these strategies are scalable. So once you get to the bigger levels, you can just keep going and keep growing it bigger and bigger. I know, because this is exactly what I did over the years. So I hope that this has helped give you at least a little bit of a roadmap that you can follow. Now, if you want my full proven system, custom made resources, and personalized help, take a look at Cardboard Profit Ignite. It's our card investing community where we've got over 100 card investors learning together and winning together. I'll leave a link in the description with full details, but otherwise, we'll see you on the next video.